There are things that we can do, as I alluded to earlier. If you go to a psychiatrist and you get your medications, take them consistently. Do as they're prescribed. If you're not feeling better or you're feeling worse, make sure you go back to the psychiatrist or call a psychiatrist, email a psychiatrist, whatever the mode of communication is, and say this is what it's doing. Be very clear. Maybe even journal what's happening when you take your medication, so that they know and they have good data points and they can start to change those medications, whether they need to change it to a different medication or up them or lower them, whatever it is. Be very active in your medication management, because you're the only one that knows how you feel between those two ears. And if you don't voice it, they're not going to call you. They're not going to be, the next time you see them, it might be a 15-minute conversation. How are you doing? And if you say, I'm doing all right, because you're just giving up hope, that's not going to be helpful for you. So you do need to take notes for yourself on any medication change, and you can just give them that notepad and say, here's how I'm feeling the last 10 days or 2 weeks or month or whatever the period of time is before you go. But I wouldn't wait a month if medications are making you feel bad. Let them know. There are things that you can do. Obviously, the therapy is going to be one. They'll recommend to you a psychiatrist, a therapist, or say you need to do therapy. We talked about that a little bit before. I agree that can be helpful, because that may help you get through some things, but it's not going to get significant change, but it's important. And if you're landlocked, you're home locked, you can't get out of the house, and you're doing all this online, there are online therapies that you can call and get set up, so you have somebody that you can talk to, you have somebody that you can discuss your issues with, bounce things off of, that isn't going to judge you, is a neutral party, and they're going to help you as much as they can in that situation. Don't be afraid to do that, especially if you can't get out of the house, because you do need help, and there is help for you. We just need to get to that point. You can also exercise. Exercise, I know it sounds funny and you've heard it before, but getting that body going tells the brain that you're not shutting down. You're not locking yourself in the cave and hiding out. And exercise can be anything from, you don't have to leave the house to exercise. You can, with YouTube, you can get on YouTube, and there's great yoga programs. My wife uses one, and I'll get that information so that you can utilize that particular series if you like. But there's plenty of yoga on YouTube. You can do yoga. You can start out as a beginner and work your way all the way up to whatever. You can do push-ups, you can do sit-ups, you can do weights, you can run in place, you can swim in your pool. Those are things that you can do at home. I'm sure there's other things that you could think of as well. Or even just simply walking around the block to get started. If you walk half an hour a day or even an hour a day, work yourself up to an hour, or you're just walking at whatever pace, it's going to make a big difference in how your brain is firing and how the endorphins are coming back online so that you can feel better. Again, it's not going to eradicate you being bipolar. You're not going to get significant change, but it may be significant compared to what you're doing if you're shutting down. So you do have to keep, if you're not doing anything, if you're just going to take your medications or not take medications, exercise is a minimum. Maybe vitamins, getting a blood test done, and making sure that you're not low on certain things that might affect you as well. All of those things can be helpful, and it's certainly worth doing. What we use for bipolar is called neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is also known as EEG biofeedback, and we've been using it for over 10 years here in Sarasota and Palm Beach Gardens. It's a non-invasive modality. The other modalities we talked about, other than ECT and TMS, are out there. They're talked about. TMS is for major depressive disorder. It's pretty non-invasive. What I see with people who do it, who come to me, that, I did a bunch of sessions. If it helps at all, you have to do it every day. I think it's for 26 days in a row, other than Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you go every day for, I think it's probably half an hour. Some people complain of headaches, so it's a little bit annoying, but as far as I know, it's pretty non-invasive. It doesn't hurt anyone. It doesn't make you worse. People that have said they feel better, it doesn't last very long, and their research shows they're about 60% effective, and then you have to do it every 6 months. So people do that. It's supposed to be only for major depressive disorder. I know they're working on OCD, but they'll push you through and try it. It doesn't hurt to try it, but I haven't seen much efficacy with it for bipolar. The other one, ECT, is electric shock therapy. And that I'm seeing more and more in the last 5 years, and it scares me because it's really aggressive. It's really an aggressive modality for the brain. You are being anesthetized, you're in a hospital setting, and they are shocking the brain until it seizes. They're looking for a seizure. So they're inducing seizure activity, and then they're going to do it anywhere from 12 to 30 times. Everyone that I've seen afterwards that did ECT has severe memory loss, headaches, difficulty sleeping, other things. Sometimes people say depression is a little bit better. It's not, I wouldn't recommend it unless you have very severe. If there's nothing else, if you've done the other things that are out there and you've actually done them, I would always recommend doing neurofeedback first, because neurofeedback is non-invasive. There's no side effects. Somebody had done a study, I can find it if you're interested. 40 years after sessions, they're still having the same. It didn't come back, whatever it was they were working on. The problem with neurofeedback and bipolar is it's a very specific protocol, and that protocol isn't in all the neurofeedback systems. There's about 5 good systems out there. Most of them do not have a protocol for bipolar, and it's not going to be that helpful if it doesn't. The other problem that I've had when I first started neurofeedback, of course, is it really that good? If it's so wonderful, why isn't everybody doing it? Why don't the doctors recommend it? I had to see for myself, and with everything, we have significant change for pretty much everybody in the population with things between their ears. Like I said, we even have success with Parkinson's. The bipolar, it was amazing. And we'll get into some of that with some antidotes, but I see people getting significantly better. And what I usually tell people in my office is, I don't know how much better you're going to get, but it's somewhere between 75 and 100%, which is life-changing. And generally, that's where we fall in. I've had very few people not have any change, if any, that were actually bipolar. So it's a wonderful modality. It's non-invasive, and you should definitely do it, but you have to do it with someone that knows what they're doing, and also someone that has the particular protocol built into that machine. But anyway, when I first started, I thought, wow, this is awesome. The system I use or other neurofeedback systems, when people called me from different states, say, hey, let me look and see if there's somebody in your town. And if there was, I would refer them to them, but I don't see the significant change. I even had one gentleman, his parents brought him down to Sarasota. He was severe. He was actually bipolar, and he was up in Michigan and did amazingly well. And it's only a 20-session protocol. He was there for about 12, but I think they came down for 12 or 13 days and did 2 sessions a day. And he went from suicidal, level 9 depression, didn't have a lot of mania, but he did have, I think he had bipolar 2, I don't quite remember. But just a young guy, 22, 23, maybe 24, giving up hope. And he actually went back home, and when he left, he felt great. He got off all his medications. He went back to school. And he wasn't doing well in school at all. He ended up being tops in his class and got into a great social worker program at, I believe, MSU, and graduated top of his class there with his master's, and is now working in mental health up in Michigan. And I hear from him now and again. That's 8 years ago or so, and he's still doing as well, if not better, then. And I forget why I got into that story, but so I see that's pretty regular. Oh, his brother also did some sessions for ADHD, but he couldn't stay very long, and he didn't start till the end. And there was an office up in Ann Arbor that was using the same equipment that I use for neurofeedback, and so I called him, referred him up there, and he only went 2 sessions, and he said it wasn't the same. The guy didn't really know what he was doing. And that to me is discouraging, because I'd like to think it's not me that's so special, but if I send them to other people, I would hope you get the same results. And sadly, it's just not. We're neurotherapists, and the neurotherapist, of course, is a very important piece. What's happened now at this point, which I'll get into again later, is my wife and I have done so many sessions over the last decade plus. I think we're trying to get the actual number, but it's around 40,000 sessions of neurofeedback with people with everything from insomnia, migraines, bipolar, PTSD, and lots of autism. We do a lot of autistic work with a lot of autistic people. and even peak performance. So doing that many sessions, and they all take about an hour, that much work, you start to learn the ins and outs of when you see person after person with different ailments or the same ailments, but they all present differently because every brain's a little bit different. You start to have so much data in your head as you're talking to people. You really know what the situation is. I can read it very quickly. I understand 98% of the time when somebody comes in, I can understand very quickly what it is that's going on, why they're feeling the way they are, and what we can do to help them. Rarely is there an issue, but it happens where I'm like, wow, I don't know what's wrong, but we can figure it out because we'll find the root for this. In fact, I have one right now in the Palm Beach Gardens office that's doing wonderfully, and I'll talk about her in a minute. But what we see with this is, again, sadly, it's not every office. I want this to be more prolific out there, and that's why, again, started the podcast. I know there are lots of people out there doing good work. The other issue with bipolar is most therapists, whether they be a neurotherapist, even a psychologist, aren't really comfortable with working with bipolar clients. Generally, the substance abuse, if they are addicted or seriously abusing substances, that has to be addressed first. But that's not generally the issue, because a lot of people do work with substance abuse or inpatient centers. But working with somebody who's severely suicidal is very frightening for people, for a therapist. If I didn't have a modality such as what we've been doing, I wouldn't be able to do the work because I'd be so worried, I'd be so frustrated. But I know when that person, or you come in the office, I'm going to be able to help you. If you're suicidal, we're going to get rid of that suicidality, the suicidal ideation within 3 sessions. And if it's 3 days in a row, I'll have you keep coming in until we've come in every day until that suicidality goes away, so I don't have to worry about you. But if you don't have that modality, which most therapists don't, it's daunting to be working with somebody that says, I just want to kill myself. I wish a bus would hit me, or whatever the situation is. And talk therapy is really not going to help that much with bipolar. It's going to help. It's definitely something that should be being done, whether at home or preferably in person. But if you are housebound, starting off with an online presence with a good therapist is definitely recommended. But so that's a problem. There's got to be a way that we can get this in more areas around the country. But for now, that's why we're starting the inpatient center. We do get a lot of people that come from out of state, and they can come down for 10, 12 days or 2 weeks. But that's not a large amount of people. We'd rather them be able to stay in their home in Texas and get somebody close to them that will help them the same way we do. And so I don't know how we get to that point, but that's a big goal of this podcast, because there is help for you. It is not hopeless. We see it every day. We will get significant change. We know if you come in our office, and hopefully you'll get that in other offices as well. So a little anecdotal discussion. That woman I referred to that's in the office now in Palm Beach Gardens, she is unipolar, is what it looks like. She's never had any depression, but she's had some manic bouts, and not really even feeling manic, but she didn't sleep for 3-4 days. She's not seen this presentation before, where there's no depression, there's not really any genetics upline. There may be a grandmother who committed suicide or something. It's not definitively clear. So what I started with her is, you're on medication. She was on lithium and something else, the mood stabilizers. I said, you've been diagnosed bipolar. I don't see the bi, so it would actually be just unipolar if that's a mania. And let's see with this protocol for bipolar if it eradicates, if you can get rid of it. She had brain fog. She had no depression, but she was worried she couldn't sleep, and she'd not sleep for 3-4 days, and then things would really go bad. And she got 2 little kids and a husband and a full-time job, and she was getting brain fog, very brain fuzzy, dizzy, a couple other things. But she's done now maybe 7 sessions of neurofeedback with me. Those things started to go after about 3 sessions. After the first or second session, she felt much better. Now at this point, she feels great. She doesn't have the brain fog anymore. She doesn't have the dizziness. She doesn't have she had lost her ability to speak with clarity, and she deferred in our intake. She had to defer to her husband because she was not comfortable speaking anymore. She was tripping. She said she would trip over her words, her tongue would get tied. It's not happening anymore. She's back on her A game, and now she's going to work with a psychiatrist to start working off that lithium and then probably the medication and see where she ends up. But that's a very odd presentation for just unipolar. But again, it's huge, significant change. Lots of fun to work with somebody like that to get her life back and not be stressed out about it. Is it coming again? So far, great. I had a gentleman, the guy with the boat. He came in Palm Beach Gardens probably 6 months ago, maybe a little longer. Maybe it was November or so. And he was severely depressed. When he was manic, he would spend lots of money, go out, and at some point he had some drug issues, and he would just go out and party. Manic, he had a lot of money, and he would spend it. When he was depressed, he was severely depressed. I think at one point he'd been hospitalized 3 or 4 times, voluntarily and not, and he had lots of suicidal ideation. And so he came in, and usually we'll see change in the first 3 to 5 sessions. He was on some pretty strong medications and had been on a lot of different ones. And about 4 sessions in, I was getting a little worried because he was getting a little better, but not much. 5 sessions, same thing. So we were, what's going on here? That's unusual for our practice. Usually we see, okay, we're on the right path. This person is getting there. 6 sessions in, it snapped. He started feeling much better. And to this date, he also had PTSD. So we also were working on that after he finished. And with the bipolar protocol, and he had tremors in the legs and hands, and it turned out that he was not on lithium. It turned out that was a trauma piece, and that's gone away as well. So this gentleman has gone from a level 8-9 depression to I think he'll tell you he's 0 to 2 on a daily basis at this point. And I believe he's off all his medications as well, and back working, back living his life. An interesting story with his family and stuff. That's a normal story. I had a young lady who worked in the urgent care. She was a nurse practitioner, I believe, young, 26, 27. When she came in, she said, I keep trying to commit suicide and I'm not successful, but I am going to be successful if this doesn't help. Somebody referred me to you. I'm bipolar. I'm substance abusing. I smoke cigarettes all the time. I'm drinking all the time. I'm smoking marijuana all the time. I'm taking my medications all the time. I'm done. Severe depression, not a lot of mania. She might have been bipolar too, I don't remember. But she came in after the 2nd or 3rd session. And of course I'm asking, okay, tell me where your brain's at. How's your depression? And she was at a 0. First time in her life that she remembered being 0 with no depression. My jaw drops all the time because it's just amazing. It's not me that's doing wonder. I'm doing great work, and it seems like I'm the bipolar guy. It's the system and knowing how to use the system, and also understanding the client, what the issues are. It's just so much experience now. It's no different than what you do. If you're a butcher, if you spend 20 hours a day doing meats, organizing meats, learning all the different meats, every cow is different. You are going to be a great butcher. If you're a business person, same thing. If you dabble in it, you're going to be okay. If you, whatever you do, if you're an attorney, if you read all the time, all the cases, and you really know your cases, and you're working with people, if you were able to work with thousands and thousands of people, you're going to be a good attorney if you're still doing it and not exhausted. We just have worked with so many people, which when I look back is amazing because we're still going. And and it's so much fun because we see people get their lives back. Anyway, she stopped smoking, she stopped drinking, she stopped smoking marijuana, she was cigarettes, and over the 10, 20 sessions, she really started to clean up her act, so to speak. She hated when people came into the urgent care. She wanted to rip their heads off. Because they were just so rude, and she just wanted to rip their heads off. She didn't, luckily. I think she had gotten one issue. She started to like working there. She started to enjoy it more, and they weren't affecting her as much, but she was feeling better, and she was getting off all the illicit drugs and also some medications, I think, too. She ended up moving back to Michigan, or moving up to Michigan and getting married. I see her about every year, maybe 6 months, and she always brings me chocolate covered cherries from up in Michigan. They're absolutely delicious, and thanking me for the work that we've done, my wife and I and our team. here in the Sarasota office, and it's so wonderful to see that time and time again. I had another gentleman, and these are all probably in our reviews if you want to dig deeper, but this gentleman was actually from Canada and was married, had a very successful business, and it was building, but he had a weird bipolar presentation. His bipolar was almost seasonal, so I wasn't sure if it was seasonal affective disorder and they were living up north, or if what it was, because he would get extremely depressed and he'd also get extremely manic. He tried everything, and he says this again in the review. I don't have it in front of me to read it, but he checked all the boxes. He moved out of the dark, dreary north. He exercised. He became a vegan or vegetarian. He took all the vitamins he was supposed to take. He did this guy's a really interesting guy, and like I said, very successful and young. He can't be 35, it might be 30. Exercises in great shape, and his wife was very worried because they wanted to have a child, and she was scared to have a child because of whatever this was, which people were saying were bipolar, and he did not like medications. So he was really glad to hear that we don't push medications, and we're not MDs, so we can't prescribe. If somebody wants medications, we refer them to a psychiatrist local, and then tell them to come back once they get stabilized. Or if they're on medications, we don't change medications. They stay the course. Nothing should be changed while we're doing what we're doing, because we don't want any other variables. And then if they decide they want to decrease their medications, they'll work with that psychiatrist to do so. Anyway, this gentleman wasn't taking meds because he didn't like them. He was doing everything else. And he didn't have it all the time. So when he came in, I said, you don't have any presentation right now. You feel fine. You're not really manic, and you're not depressed. So I don't know what we're going to be working on to see change, because then we're just waiting for time to see if it's going to go away or not. So he agreed, and he said he'd wait, and he came back 6 months later. He called and said, and this is probably 3-4 years ago, came back and said, okay, I need to come in. I'm really severely depressed. Things are falling apart. And he came in and had a number of symptoms that were very clearly bipolar. And I think he would say he got 100% better. He did a lot of work on his own. He wasn't, like I said, medications weren't a problem. He was really healthy. He was taking care of himself. And then he decided, because he did so well with that, and he was telling everybody, because he's an online presence, that he also wanted to do peak performance. And peak performance is to take us, whether CEOs or athletes, we do a lot of athletes for peak performance, and a lot of professional athletes are doing it. If you saw the quarterback show last year, Kirk Cousins would say during practice, I got to go do my neurofeedback. Kim Kardashian said it on, not Kim, but one of her sisters said it on during one of their shows. I have to go. Where are you going? I have to go do my neurofeedback. So it started in California and UCLA in 1950s, late 50s, and we'll get into another podcast and get really specific about what it does, how it works, and why it works so significantly. Anyway, this gentleman decided to do peak performance. He did that as well. So he did 20 sessions of bipolar and 20 sessions for peak performance, and it's doing outstanding. And he'll call every now and again and talk about what we've done and what we're doing and how thankful he is. And he has a baby. The baby was born maybe 6 months ago or so, and the baby's adorable. Again, great story. That relationship might not have made it. They were pretty young married. She didn't see it until she started really being married and living with him. She just thought he was fun or whatever. Being married and thinking about having a child, it was really quite concerning to her, as it should be, and concerning to him as well. And so when she got her husband back and knew that he was stable, that was huge. And again, they're raising this child and doing really well. The story with the gentleman I told you about earlier in the other office who had the boat and was suicidal, his wife will say continuously, I got my husband back. And that's across the board. We'll hear that. A parent or a significant other, I got my wife back, I got my husband back, I got my son back. Because it's very frightening in that relationship. You never know. And suicidality has become more and more prevalent, not just with bipolar, but sadly kids. Social media is a real problem. Marijuana usage is a real problem, especially for young teens. We see a lot of psychosis in that 13 to 15 range. The brain can't handle that heavy marijuana. They think it's fine, it's just a weed, but it's not. It's very strong. And a lot of them are ending up in the hospital with psychosis and still not wanting to stop because they don't believe it's because of the marijuana, but we're seeing it consistently now. And I think there's some research for that. Generally people won't diagnose, psychiatrists won't diagnose until certain ages. I don't like the diagnoses because it labels the person, so I'm not going to be quick to say, yep, you're bipolar. Generally come to me with bipolar, I'd rather not tell you that you are and just say, yeah, whatever this is, we can help you really significantly change that, if not get rid of it. And it doesn't matter what it's called. It just matters that we can resolve this problem, so to speak. I have had a number of very young children. The youngest I work with is 6. One story I have, the kid was about 9, and he was a big kid. His father was 6'8", I believe, was a professional pitcher at some point. His mother was also tall. She was 6'1", 6'2". So the child was going to be very large. And at 9 years old or so, he was becoming very threatening. Knives in his hand, chasing his mom around the kitchen, screaming, hollering, punching walls. Very angry and very aggressive. Very unusual behavior for a child. Children are not born bad. Children are not born dangerous. Children are not born, it's either severe trauma, could be physical trauma, could have been with some brain damage, in vitro after, or not in vitro, in utero, or after the birth, or something happened, they get dropped on their head. And I haven't seen that, but that's certainly a possibility. It could be trauma, it could be sexual trauma, it could be physical trauma, it could be severe emotional trauma that you'll see behavioral acting out at this level, or it could be bipolar. And in this case, it was bipolar. There was a lot of genetic bipolar upline, so that was the direction you want. The kid became completely normative, did well in school, never knew, still to this day doesn't know that was a diagnosis. I'm not sure I even told the parents, but that's what it was. I see him, he lives in the area. I see him often, and he doesn't even remember. He's probably 14 or 15 now. Doesn't really, barely remembers me, which is great. He doesn't know any of it happened. His life is changed dramatically, so his parents got the kid back, and they continued to nurture him and love him, and now he's a healthy young man, as opposed to all the trials and tribulations he would have had if he'd been on medications and had done nothing else. So that's really fun. When they work, the younger they are, the funner it is, because even though they're not going to know us, they're not going to remember us, their life has changed dramatically, and they're going to have a life, and a good life generally, and that's really exciting. So they didn't have to struggle with this through their teens and their young 20s until they figured something out, then they got on medications or something else. I want to wrap this up. We're going way too long, but we're going to get into how we do this, what we're doing, what other things we work with. But that's a good synopsis of the bipolar family and what we do. And again, the reason I'm called the bipolar guy is because 50% of my practice has become bipolar. I'm the go-to guy. We're the go-to office for bipolar disorders, and we love doing it because we have great success with it. Any questions you have, you can certainly leave, and we're going to be doing lots more podcasts. We're also going to touch base on other things, not just bipolar, but PTSD and all the things I mentioned earlier. So thank you very much if you're watching this and you watch this all the way through, thank you. I hope it helps. If there's something I can do that would be more helpful in these podcasts, please let me know. But information is so powerful, and what I find across the board in my practice is they don't understand, parents, loved ones, the client, don't really understand what's going on, what they have. They don't feel like they get straight answers. That's what we do differently in our practice. We are going to figure out what the issue is, what the roots are, and that's what we're going to attack. And there's lots of people in the country that can do that as well. Again, that's the goal of this podcast, is to make it publicly known that there is something for bipolar and these other ailments that is extremely helpful and will change your life. So thank you very much. Have a great week. We'll have another podcast coming every Friday. I'm going to do a podcast all about mental health. You'll meet my wife soon, Dr. Ann, fabulous therapist, fabulous neurotherapist. We have a great time together, and she's been on this journey with me. We are partners in life and also in the practice, and it's really been fun and amazing to work with her. Thank you. Have a great night, and I will see you soon.